Well, hi there, everybody, and welcome to Just the Facts episode number. What episode is it, Bob? It's number 8. We're talking all things online inventory and all that good stuff. It's going to be fun. We have a special guest. For those that are new to our listening audience out there, this is not a Carfax commercial. You do see Carfax logos right here. You see some Carfax dolls in the background. But this is not a Carfax commercial. This is all about industry insights and bringing in special guests to help us with those insights and really answering some of the pain points that dealers are facing today. And one of them is inventory. And so we've spent a few episodes on this subject. We're going to gear things in the direction of stuff online. And as we do that, Bob, online inventory is a different animal. And I know that there's folks out there in acquiring inventory. That would be our dealerships out there. It might be a tough road, right? It might be something like, I don't know. I've always gone to the physical auction, but what are some of the benefits to acquiring inventory, especially in 2021 online?
Well, you're absolutely right. Dealers, some used to love doing it online when it first came out, right? But most still like going to touch them and feel them and do all the things, a little camaraderie at the auction, right? It was just one of those things. They planned it on a Tuesday or a Thursday or whatever they did. But when COVID came around and that became more and more difficult, and as inventory dried up a little bit, and more importantly, as the dealers shrunk their size, right? A lot of them had to let some people go. They shrunk their inventories. They're wearing multiple hats. It's almost become more and more important to be able to have those avenues online so that you could stay at your dealership, right? There's a lot going on. Laws change, rules change daily. So a lot of your buyers and managers and so forth have found that staying at the dealership has taken priority over going to those physical auctions. Not to mention, quite a few of those physical auctions have closed, at least temporarily or in some regard, based on COVID, right? So the online just had to happen. Not everyone's comfortable at it. Some are good at it, some not so good, but everyone's having to learn to be more and more comfortable online.
Nope, I hear you. And, I started with this little company, pre-Carfax. I've been with Carfax since 2006, a long time. And back in 2003, I worked for this little company called Auto Trade Center. And we had off-lease inventory from captive finance companies. And shout out to Steve, Ben, Casey, Peter, all those guys back then. Small company at the time. And they're now part of the big company, Car Global, who we have on today. But back then, it seemed like dealers would say, I will never, never, never buy inventory online. It's just not going to happen, which is kind of the same as I will never use the internet to buy anything for my house. So back in, because you spent a lot of time in a dealership, right? And so you were a buyer at a time. And so was that ever your thought process? And if it was, what changed?
Well, the internet's not going to stick around, so I don't even know why we're having that meeting, right? That's not going to stick. That's a fad, right?
Exactly.
It's just a comfort level. But not only is it a comfort level, but the tools have gotten a lot better, right? The information you can have about a vehicle has gotten a lot better. We're certainly part of that here at Carfax, but the equipment's gotten better. The listings have gotten better. The photos have gotten better. The descriptions have gotten, the guarantees have gotten better. So just like consumers are learning to buy online, so true, some of the dealers have had to learn to do that. But it's been an evolution, not only for the dealer's mentality of whether to do it or not, but quite frankly, their tools and their ability to do a good job and ability to know fair pricing and, the condition reports and all that kind of stuff has gotten a lot better than it was even 10 years ago. So that's made it capable of being done. And as dealers have gotten more comfortable and the tools have gotten better, it's just been a good situation to be more and more effective buying cars online.
Cool. Hey, did you know your phone's vibrating?
Yeah.
And it better be an important phone call or just
it is.
Toss that thing to the side or something. I heard it. I heard that vibration going on. No, that's great stuff. And I know the tools and, a lot of our partners out there have gotten so good at really evaluating vehicles and inspection companies and history companies and all kinds of stuff to really make an intelligent decision when it comes to buying inventory, especially online. And so I know we're not the experts in this field by any means, but we do have a little bit of insight. But we do have a really special guest today, don't we? That is an expert in this field and has quite a resume. I thought we'd go word for word on this resume, but we'd probably just spend all of our time doing that because he's been around the block.
We've been blessed on this program to have some outstanding people come on and help us, right? And today is no exception whatsoever. We have Mr. Steve Jordan, who is the Senior Vice President of KAR Global Dealer Sales, right? Both U.S. and Canada. So shout out to our Canada people on there. We're hoping we have some Canadians. We sent out the invite and we're welcoming them absolutely on board. But before that, he was a former CEO of the National Independent Automobile Dealers Association, which absolutely is important to bring to the table. And he's a former dealer himself. So absolutely well-rounded. Couldn't think of a better person to speak to it. So with that, let's welcome on Mr. Steve Jordan. Steve, if you'll join us, we'd love to talk to you.
There he is. Hey, Steve. Still on mute.
You're on mute, Steve. That's the most famous line.
There you go. most commonly overheard phrase during the pandemic, you're on mute.
Welcome to live.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invite, DJ and Robert. Happy to be here. And let's mix it up a little bit.
Well, we're going to start right off on landing on the expert. We're just going to ask you and make it an easy one for you. What are you seeing in the market today, Steve? What is it coming at you?
Well, we're not seeing anything different than anybody else is seeing. I can tell you, as everybody on this podcast will agree, the market is red hot. I mean, we're seeing prices and values across the board, across the country, in every market, every class of vehicle, trim model, everything is up over 2020 and even pre-pandemic levels. It's all being driven by tight supply, strong demand. Everybody knows the deal. The market is hot.
So with that being said, what's the outlook for 2021? Do you think it's going to stay hot? Is it going to cool off? What's your insights tell you?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I know as new car production continues to normalize, I feel like hopefully we'll end up around 16.5 million units sold this year, hopefully.
Yeah.
And what that means is more trade-ins, and that's a good thing. I think you're also going to see the continued normalization on the travel front as, more people get vaccinated, more states get into a kind of a reopened position. I know several states have been a little bit more aggressive than others. So as you start to see a normalization across the country and travel as we knew it kind of pre-COVID, I think you'll start to see a loosening up of the rental fleets. Right now, rental fleets are holding onto their vehicles a little bit longer. And that's also creating some of that tighter demand on the inventory side. So I don't think we're out of the woods quite yet, but the future looks optimistic.
So overall, you'd paint a pretty picture for 2021?
Well, look, I would say it's always a great time to be in the car business. But I would say optimistically, it's, there's good on the horizon.
Well, looking at KAR Global, we hear different stories. Of course, we only hear what we hear. Are you guys going 100% digital? Is that the forward thinking, or are we just hearing things?
You are not hearing things. KAR Global, to your point earlier, Robert, COVID really changed things, and I would argue, and KAR Global is arguing, that it really accelerated the digital transformation of our industry. And look, KAR Global has always had a position of safety in the marketplace as a number one priority. Our leadership, former CEO Jim Hallett, was very clear about being safe in the lane. And COVID really accentuated that, not only for KAR Global, but for the industry. And I would say, short answer to your question, KAR Global is on the forefront of the digital transformation and has made the decision as a company that the digital future is the future for KAR Global. So to that point, we are 100% digital and not looking back. We don't have any plans at this time to run cars again in the lane. So,
well, you know what? That's interesting. And you know, a lot of people have thought that may be the way to go. There's not 100% comfort in that. It's great to see you being aggressive and going after that forefront. So what would be one or two quick bullet points you could give our dealers listening as to how to be successful digitally, right? If you're going to buy inventory digitally, what are the one or two key points, if you would, that a dealer should pay attention to?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, know your lane, right? Know the kind of inventory that you're trying to liquidate.
Yeah.
I would say this is where Car Global and ADESA and kind of the ADESA Backlot Cars partnership really comes to the forefront, right? Because our goal as Car Global is to make wholesale easy for our dealer partners and our dealer customers. And we know that sometimes, you know, franchise dealers may have frontline overaged inventory that maybe would perform better in lane or online. But I can tell you, know your lane, and if your inventory is $7,000 to $10,000 or less,
yeah,
a digital platform like Backlot Cars can really be a successful platform for you. You know, higher end, like I said, maybe selling at ADESA through the lane on ADESA.com or simulcast could be a good solution. But again, that's where Car Global really has a unique position in the marketplace, because we have not only the digital assets to meet the dealers where their inventory is at, but the physical assets as well to marshal and recon and store vehicles and do all the things that kind of creates this robust economic marketplace in the industry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, is there a particular price point, a particular age point, a particular equipment line that accelerates better online than others? Is there sweet spots in inventory online versus maybe a physical or some other means?
Well, I would say short answer is yes, but the data tells us that some of those influences are regional. There's mileage components, there's age components. But I can tell you, based on our dealer experience, dealers who are selling that $10,000 or less vehicle on Backlot Cars are seeing an incredible, an incredible retention number, a wholesale valuation number compared to Black Book and MMR. I mean, look, the market, like I said earlier, is red hot. So, you know, the retention and the wholesale values are very, very compelling right now. But the thing that makes Backlot Cars and part of the digital transformation that Car Global is going through is the reach that we've been able to establish with our buyer base. Yeah. Once we've made the decision to go digital, stop running cars in the lanes. Like I said, we don't have plans at this time to run cars in the lanes, because what we're finding is the digital transformation is actually a better opportunity for dealers, and having the assets like Backlot Cars and ADESA combined, both the physical infrastructure and the digital platform, really puts us and the dealers in a position to say, just give us the inventory, we'll source it in whatever asset or whatever platform can perform the best for you, Mr. Dealer, on our way to making wholesale easy for you. But a couple of quick, interesting statistics. Since CAR decided to go 100% digital, we've seen dealer attendees nearly double at all of our sales. We've seen cross-state bidding nearly double at 93%. So we're seeing 93% growth in cross-state bidding when you start to apply a digital footprint to the wholesale process. And higher buyer engagement, we're seeing on bids per unit sold, that increased by about 17% across the board. Units sold, 17% higher buyer engagement and bid activity. And we know this because the digital technology allows us to see what our buyers and sellers are doing online. We can get as granular as to see where a buyer is moving his cursor over a vehicle, over the history report, over the buy button or the bid button. All of those things really kind of come into play. And I can tell you the early returns that we've seen by moving into this digital transformation have been very, very positive, not only for our dealers, but for Car Global as well.
That's nice.
No, that's great. And I'm going to jump in here. It all sounds great. And this is kind of when I jump in part of the podcast and say there's two issues, time and money. So things cost money and things, especially changing a process. So if we're talking to an independent dealer that's out there watching today, or we're talking to even a franchise dealer and they want to start a different process, some of that takes some time, right? And a little bit of capital as well. So what can Car Global do to help a dealer that's never bought online before get started? And then what do you do to help those dealers out there to really ramp up some of that inventory lines for the frontline inventory?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the very short answer to that question is backlot cars. So I'll cover a couple of the highlights, but at the end of the day, if there's anybody who's interested in trying to figure out how to leverage the digital platform to their advantage, I would encourage anybody to go to backlotcars.com/sellers. Just put a couple of bits of information in there and we can have somebody follow back up with you to answer very specific questions that you may have. But look, I would say overall, Backlot Cars has figured out a way to make wholesaling easy for its dealers. And to that degree, some of the dealers that are using it have often said, look, I'm a creature of habit. I've been going to the auction forever. That's just how I know how to buy and sell cars. So what I would say to that dealer is Backlot Cars doesn't want to change necessarily how you're doing business in that way. What we want to do is just augment it and give you another option in that process. So for example, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I've sent all my cars to ADESA or another auction, what we would simply come in and say on the Backlot Car side is, hey, well, that's great. You can continue to do that. Send your cars to ADESA, but let an inspector from Backlot Cars come out, list your vehicle on the 3-day marketplace that Backlot Cars has created, and let us augment what you're currently doing, because what we're seeing is dealers who are going upstream on the digital platforms first are getting a bigger reach of a buyer base, and by extension, higher retention, higher wholesale value. So that's what I would say to dealers who inherently are, we're all human nature, creatures of habit, right? We know what we know what we're used to. But what I would encourage anybody to do is just give Backlot Cars a chance to augment what you're currently doing. Take that first bite of the apple upstream online on a digital platform like Backlot Cars, and what we're seeing is the retention and the values and the reach are very, very compelling. So specifically, I would say this. For vehicles who are about $7,000 or less on Backlot Cars, we're seeing a buyer-based reach of about 319 miles. For dealers who are selling cars 7,000 to 10,000, that reach is about 455 miles. Basically, the distance between Dallas and Kansas City, right?
It's amazing, yeah.
It is. And then if you're talking about vehicles with $10,000 or more, the reach is 567 miles. So what we've been able to create with this Backlot Cars intersection is a massive kind of reach in the industry that really puts dealers in the driver's seat to win. So it's a very compelling argument. I would also say one other thing. 40% of our buyers are using the Buy It Now feature on Backlot Cars. And 25% of those purchases are happening between 8 p.m., and 8 a.m. And even though it's a 3-day listing on the Backlot Cars marketplace, 83% of the vehicles listed in the marketplace sell within the first 26 hours of listing. So it's a very compelling argument to at least try it out, see how it goes. And oh, by the way, when Backlot Cars sends an inspector, a mechanic inspector to your lot to inspect the vehicles, photograph them, list them on the marketplace, we do that for absolutely no cost. There's no cost to the dealer. There's no selfie on Backlot Cars. And at the end of the day, because they've dialed in this inspection process, we've been able to limit the amount of arbitrations to less than 1%. And that's huge. And part of the reason for that is because when a mechanic goes out to inspect a vehicle at a dealer's lot, it's Backlot Cars making a representation to the buyer base about the condition of that vehicle. We own the condition report. We own the representation of that vehicle to the buyer community. It's not the dealer. And that's a tremendous unlock to the dealer community to say, hey, Backlot Cars is making a representation to the buyer community about the condition of this vehicle. So if there's ever an issue, we own it. And that's part of the reason why our arbitrations in the aggregate are less than 1% across the board.
Well, thank you.
Fantastic. So for you guys still hanging on, thank you again for attending. We'll see you next time on Just the Facts.
Take care, everybody.